Hi everyone, Mrs. Bilo here. In this video, I'm going to be going over questions 11 through 20 for the semester 1 review over significant figures, or what we call sig figs, which we did last semester. And I just want to review this because oftentimes when we're doing anything with math in this class, I will ask you to write your answer using a specific number of significant figures or sig figs. Now, for this assignment, you only have to do questions 11 through 15. The rest of them are optional, but you can feel free to do these if you feel like you need extra practice. I'm going to go over all of these in this video. Now, significant figures, there are a lot of rules for these things. However, I have just learned this trick here to always getting the right answer. So Pacific present and Atlantic absent. So you want to look at the number and ask, do you see a decimal point present? Yes, we do. So that means the decimal point is present Pacific. So what we're going to do is we're going to approach this number from the left side. If this number is the United States, then over here would be the Pacific Ocean. So we're going to approach that number, and the first number that you come across that is not 0, so any number besides 0, we're going to count that as significant and everything after that as significant. So if I'm approaching this number from here, the first number I come across that is not 0 is the 1. So I would count that as significant and everything after it as significant. So this would have 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures total. Now for the next problem, there is no decimal present. There's no decimal point. So we would do Atlantic absent. So again, if the number, which in this case is 15, is the United States, the Atlantic Ocean would be on this side of the number. So I would approach from that way, and I would count the first number I come across that's not a 0 as significant, and everything after that as significant. So this would be my first significant figure, and that would be my second significant figure. So this only has 2 significant figures. For question 13, I have 0.006. So again, the decimal is present. So if the number is the United States, I'm going to approach from the Pacific Ocean side. So again, you want to count the first number that you come across that's not a 0. So notice I'm skipping these zeros because I didn't hit a number that's not 0. So the first number I come across that is not a 0 is the 6. So this one would actually only have 1 significant figure. For question 14, the decimal point is present. So again, I'm going to approach from the Pacific Ocean side, again, acting as though the number is the United States. So the first number I come across that's not a 0 is the 5. So I would start there, counting that as significant and everything after it as significant. So this one would have 4 significant figures. For question 15, there is no decimal present. So that means I would approach from the, if this number is the United States, this is the Atlantic Ocean side, I would approach from this side. And again, you start at the number that is not a 0. So notice I'm skipping that 0. So I would start at 5. So I would count that as significant and everything after it as significant. That would be 3 significant figures. Again, I'm just writing these numbers here to help me with counting the number of significant figures. For question 16, the decimal is present. So I'm going to approach from the Pacific Ocean side. And again, it's the first number you come across that's not a 0. So that would be 5. So I would count that as significant and everything after it as significant, including these zeros here. Really, you're just figuring out where do you start counting, and then you want to count everything after that as significant. So this would have 4 significant figures. For question 17, there is a decimal present. So I would approach from the Pacific side. The first number I come across that's not a 0 is the 1. So I would count that as significant and everything after that as significant. So this would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures. And then you can see for these last 3 problems, there are decimal points present in all of them. So for all of them, I'm going to approach from the left-hand side. The Pacific Ocean side. Remember, Pacific present. And again, you want to start at the first number you come across that's not a 0. So this would be 9. So I would count that as significant and everything after that as significant. So this would have 4 significant figures. For this question, the first number I come across that's not a 0 is the 1. So I would start there, and this would have 3 significant figures. For the last question, the first number I would come across that's not a 0 is the 5. So this would only have 1 significant figure. So that's an easy way to count significant figures is remember Pacific present. Again, this is the number. The United States is representing the number that you're looking at. And if a decimal is present, you're going to approach from the left-hand side. And you start at the first number that is not a 0, and you count that as significant and everything after it as significant. Versus if there is no decimal present, you're going to start from the right-hand side when approaching that number, and again, start counting at the first number that you come across that's not a 0, and everything after that as significant.